Hello everyone, my name is Jean-Claude Burgerman and I'm the Professor of Open Science Policy at the Free University of Brussels. Before that, I worked for a long time at the European Commission where I was in charge of open access and open science policies. I welcome you to this edition of the Frontiers Policy Lab, presented in collaboration with Keystone Symposia. The purpose of this series is to offer insights, reflections, and lessons learned for the future in terms of the interface between science and policy, because it is clear that what has happened the last couple of months will have profound effects on how we do science, how we fund science in the future, what will be the balance in the funding and so forth. As part of launching the Policy Lab, I'm speaking today with one of the leading figures in Europe on precisely this interface between science and policy, and that person is Robert-Jan Smits. Robert-Jan Smits is currently the president of the executive board of Eindhoven Technical University, one of the leading technical universities in the world. Before that, he has worked most of his career, so several decades, in DG Research and Innovation of the European Commission, of which he was the Director General from 2010 to 2018. And it's precisely in those years that I was part of that DG, and he was the person supporting me heavily on the open access and open science policy. So I have to declare this a conflict of interest. He was also, as the last part of his career, one of the main architects between Plan S, which is the funders' strategy of Europe and abroad to push for immediate open access. What is the main lesson as an ex-top policymaker and a present chair of a board that you draw for the mid to long-term future of science and science policy from what we have seen under Corona?
I think what I've learned from the COVID-19 crisis is the importance of cooperation, of reaching out to each other at global level, share data, share publications, because this is such a complex challenge we all are facing, that only by joining forces across the globe we can beat the virus and we can find a vaccine and medication. So that's the biggest lesson I learned, the importance of openness.
One of the most striking things that I witnessed happening the last 3 to 4 months is that suddenly what we have been fighting for years, and most of the time uphill, became default, namely all publications related to Corona became in full open access, no more paywalls. All the data necessary for people to work on it became openly available and interoperable. So in the splits, not in a split second, but in a matter of days, what took us years to put on the agenda and for which we often had a lot of critique, suddenly became the default reality. So my key point, my key reflection there is that, is this a turning point? Is this a tipping point? Or will we go back to before? My personal view is there is no way back anymore. But from your point of view, as an ex-funder, as chair of the board, please, how do you see this?
Well, Jean-Claude, I'm convinced that open access will be the new normal. And that certainly the COVID-19 crisis has shown us how important it is that we share immediately, without embargoes and without high paywalls, the results of publicly funded research. From a moral point of view, it would have been unacceptable if indeed the results of publicly funded research in COVID-19 would have been locked behind paywalls for the happy few to have access to, or only available for the many after embargo periods of up to 12 months. So I think indeed this really has, the COVID-19 crisis has really pushed all big commercial publishers to go into open access. And the fact that we see now, even in a prestigious journal of Elsevier called Neuron, that the editors and the ones who publish in this prestigious journal say, go open access, accept Plan S, Elsevier, and make this a new normal, shows that indeed we are reaching a tipping point.
For a crisis like Corona, which potentially affects millions of lives, or could have affected millions of lives, it seems to have been very easy to reach this point of no return. But if you think about it and you look at it from the moon, the same kind of challenges will come back, but also we will see them in climate, we will see them in food and so on. And my fear then personally is that we should try to find mechanisms to consolidate this, because if it is for research related to climate, you might think, okay, let's go back to the paywalls. What do you think about that?
Well, I think although the COVID-19, of course, will speed up now the transfer to the transition to full media open access, I think the ones who really are the actors who can change the system and push towards open access are, of course, the funding agencies. And that's what Plan S was all about, mobilizing funders, funding agencies in the field of science and the field of research to sign up to a plan whereby the rules are a very simple one. If you get a grant researcher from any of the funding agencies, wherever located, who have signed up to Plan S, you can only publish in high quality open access journals. So I think this push from funding agencies from across the globe to make it clear that we want to go towards open access has put things in motion. I compare it by throwing a stone in the water, and the rippling effects were there. And now with the COVID-19 crisis, it's completely clear that we have to make this the new normal. Open access should not be the exception anymore. It should become the rule. And I can only hope that this will now be happening.
The scientists themselves have now clearly seen that open access leads to better science. Open science leads to faster, more productive, more responsive science, because otherwise they have pushed for everything to be open. It didn't come per se from anyone else, don't you think so?
Yeah, absolutely. Although, let's also be clear about that, there's also a lot of conservatism in the science community. Why? And I see it also very clearly at the university I'm at now. Your scientific career will be very much determined by not what you publish, but where you publish. And this is his obsession with the journal impact factor. So we need as well to work towards new metrics, and you yourself, Jean-Claude, will be working on that in the context of open science. Because as long as people are rewarded for where they publish instead of what they publish, and as long as people are not rewarded at the university for the teaching they do, for the knowledge they transfer to industry, for the societal problems they address, for science communication, providing scientific support to policy making, as long as this recognition for that work is not there, it will be very difficult to really reach the final stage of 100% open access. So there's a lot of vested interest in the system. New metrics will help. But also, let's not fool ourselves. The market, the global market of scientific publications has a value of 15 billion euro. 15 billion euro. And is dominated by 5 large commercial publishers, and we all know them. They will not let go of this cash cow that easily. There's also another lesson we learned from COVID-19, and that is, of course, besides open access, how important it is of course also how vulnerable we are with regard to our medical technologies and medication. I think a country like the Netherlands, I think 80% of all the medical equipment and compounds of medication comes from outside the Netherlands. And even mouth caps and even ventilators, we had only a few. So I think also the COVID-19 crisis showed that on some key sectors of our society, whether it is health or food or energy, you have to make sure that you're not over-dependent on other countries. So from that point of view, COVID-19 has also taught us all the lesson that the whole outsourcing and being completely dependent on others has its limits.
Exactly, and that is really a very interesting debate, because it means that you have to list almost what do you consider critical for your society, region. Let's take Europe, to have a kind of a sustainable life cycle for yourself. And that you see also in the discourse of the Commission, of the present Commission increasing. Yeah, you see a lot of points being made about what are the industries we should keep, how can we relocate some of what we dislocated, bringing it back to Europe and so on. And you're quite right there. And my question, my reflection there would then be, so does this also apply for research and science? Because science by default is a global enterprise, and do we need to do some of the science in-house, or can we just assume that it will fall out globally?
No, it will certainly also have an impact on science. And let me take an example, 5G. Europe has all the technology, all the know-how, all the skills to build its own 5G industry. So why are we not doing that? Why are we not creating a project of European interests with all the talent and all the knowledge we have? I've always said, when we in Europe join forces, we are unbeatable. Take Airbus and take CERN for fundamental research. Why are we not doing that in other fields? And I think now with the new industrial policy of the European Union, we'll see that we'll go more to projects of European interest, like the recent initiatives on batteries, or the work which have been doing on the European Open Science Cloud. So I think Europe will increasingly make sure that it has on key enabling technologies enough knowledge, enough ownership, and is not dependent on others, or at least is less dependent on others. And that's, I think, is great. But it will require, in the context of this new industrial policy, notably a revision of the state aids policy, the competition policy, because that has been blocking a lot of European flagships to get on the road. Take, for instance, the merger between Alstom and Siemens in the field of train production. That was forbidden by European competition authorities. So I think part of this new industrial policy is unavoidably a review of the European competition policy to allow much more this type of mergers in order to allow us as Europe to be a global actor which can compete with the United States and China.
Isn't it a huge challenge how to translate this into a political institutional logic? Because when both of us were in the machine and we saw how the machine works, and it is and where we all know that all these challenges are linked and that the solution is to work together, the reality is quite often on the table, around the table. It's not very easy to get all the noses, the political noses, then pointing in the right direction. And the perverse effect of a life-threatening challenge like Corona is that people forget this and then come together. But for all these other challenges, it's less life-threatening. So how to translate that into an institutional reality is, I think, a huge challenge for not only in Europe, but also globally.
Yeah, I think Europe has now clearly put its card on the Green Deal to accelerate the transitions. I think the money which will now be available, the big funds we talk about at European level, in order to boost the economy, will be used in a clever way, indeed, to facilitate and to accelerate the transitions. We would be foolish if we would use that money just to continue with the status quo or the industry or the society of the past. No, we need to use this crisis to move to the next phase and to boost the different transitions in the different areas and to make sure that we build an economy on a different basis. The globalization, which we have seen over the last number of years happening, has created, of course, enormous wealth, has led to openness, has generated new innovations. But I think we also see very clearly that this globalization has also a number of side effects, that the gap between rich and poor is getting bigger and bigger, that we see a couple of major multinational companies who are becoming giants, not economically, but also politically. But also what we see is, of course, thanks to the global economy, that there's a new continent which has really come forward, and that is China. And I think that is for the United States very much probably the big worry, certainly for the Trump administration, that they're seeing that because of the openness of the economy, because of globalization, there is now a continent which is challenging the United States as regards its technological leadership. So that's, I find at the moment, quite an interesting situation, but also a dangerous situation. Will this globalization, the openness, the cooperation, will that mode really go in reverse as we see at the moment, will it gradually disappear and it will be an American first all over the place, Europe in China? Or are we still able to keep an open system, open economy, cooperation across the globe? And there, I think scientists have to show that they still believe in openness and cooperation. And I think COVID-19 has shown how important it is that scientists from the United States, China and Europe, and from Brazil and South Africa work together to find a vaccine and medication.
Imagine tomorrow we could decide on a key game changer to continue the benefits which you just highlighted as what we have seen. What would be the key point you would put in place to make sure we don't go back to the situation before?
That's a good one. That requires, I think, leadership at political level. It requires leadership from the science community. It requires leadership from the cultural communities to show indeed that we want another world. We want a world in which there is a much smaller gap in wealth between rich and poor. We want to have a world which is safe. We want to have a world which is healthy. So from that point of view, not going back to the days we had before only depends on the willingness of the people, of the leaders, to indeed move forward and not to go in reverse and to go backwards. And it requires a lot of leadership. And we see that, thank God, in a number of areas, climate debates, where even we see young people who take the lead and say, let's not go back to the old days. We see that in the field of the COVID-19, viral diseases, where scientists say, let's accelerate our cooperation. So I'm a strong believer that leaders in these different areas hopefully will show us in the right direction. But again, the forces of a me first policy are extremely strong and of course very appealing. And you see that also with regard to vaccine development and number of companies who said to vaccine producers, me first. And as long as I can get hold of the vaccines, everything's okay. And what you then do with the us, I don't care. And that's, of course, a very tempting policy, but of course not the right one.
Yeah. And you're right. And you know what is really interesting? What I found that if you compare these kind of statements by politicians and you compare them by the top scientists in the top companies working on the vaccines, they say exactly the opposite. Whatever we will do will be for the benefit for everyone, or we don't do it. You know, the chief scientific guy from Johnson & Johnson said, we will make sure there will be enough and it will be affordable, because otherwise I just failed as a doctor and as a scientist. If I can come back to your role as chair of the board of a very good and important technical university, next September you will open a new academic year. What kind of messages would you like to give your students and your staff? Imagine you have to give the opening speech, bearing in mind what you have seen happening the last couple of months and what we discussed now.
Well, I mean, the message will always be a message of hope or a better future, but also we'll announce at the university that we're going to invest big time in artificial intelligence. We have set up an institute for that. We are creating an institute and launching it at the opening of the academic year on the storage of renewable energy. So we are very much going into those areas, which again will be the areas where the transitions will take place, but also where the new market opportunities will be.
I think you're looking forward to go back to your university on your bicycle again very soon. And what do you hope to get there?
Well, what I hope to see there is, of course, lots of students, notably first-year students who come from all over the world to enjoy the Eindhoven spirits and to enjoy the education, the great education we offer at our university. So that's one thing I'm desperately for, is indeed to see all these young, brilliant people coming together on campus and doing their work in the labs. The student teams, of course, participating in the international competitions. So that is what I'm longing for. That's what I'm eager to see. But I'm not the only one, because I meet some students from time to time, and they all are, of course, desperately, eagerly, impatiently waiting to go back on campus and to do the things which they were used to do. And that is also something which we probably have noticed. What we considered to be normal before now has become very special. Going to a restaurant, going to a bar, sitting out of a terrace, having beer with friends, that was normal. But now we have understood and we have learned how precious that all is and how special that all is. And I think we should keep that in mind as well.
No, that's a very good one. We have to to appreciate what we took for granted much more than we did.
Yeah, and that's about
Thank
freedom.
you very much.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your insight. Thank you.